Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Wise, I'd like to take this time to walk through the 5-year forecast update. As you may recall, in October I do the full-blown new forecast that's required by law, and then in May I'm obligated by law again to update the forecast. I'm pleased to say that there are no material changes to the forecast. That's why I want to kind of start at the end. Usually I use this slide as a wrap-up to show you how everything shakes out when we go through the new 5-year forecast. But seeing that this is just an update, I wanted to just show you that if you look at this graph from the last time, it looks basically the same. We are a little bit up on revenues, about 2.5% over what I estimated, which is, I want to be right in that 2% range. And our expenditures were roughly 0.5% under where I anticipated them being. So we're a little bit better on the revenue side, a little bit better on the expenditure side. The key numbers I want you to see are these green bars. That's our cash balance. You can see it does decline a bit at the end of the forecast in 2018, which is that column right there. But we still have, I talk a lot about having a target balance of 3 to 6 months of cash. This first column in 2014, we're right about 5.6 months of cash balance, and at the end of the forecast, we're still at 3.3 months of cash balance. So we're in that range where we like to be. I do anticipate, if there aren't any great changes in the state funding model as we move forward through 2018, that we should be able to keep that cash balance. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But that's really the one thing that is always out there. We do a 5-year forecast, and the longest budget we ever get from the state of Ohio is a 2-year budget. So that's always a little bit, doesn't always add up, but it can cause issues into the future. One thing I did want to point out, in 2016, if you see the red bar is a little bit over the gold bar, that's where we start spending a little bit more than we're bringing in. I do anticipate that kind of shakes out to the good in that year, but we're getting close to that amount. In 2017 and 18 is where we really have to start looking at what we're doing with some of our expenditures to try to get those more in line. So these are carrying the same assumptions that I did in October as far as personnel services, adding the all-day, everyday kindergarten, kind of anticipating the Affordable Care Act changes. Nothing's really changed from those assumptions, but I just wanted to point that out that in 2016 we do anticipate starting to deficit spend. Going to the next slide, I really want to talk about 2 key items in revenues. I want to talk about our taxes, our property taxes, and I also want to talk about our state funding formula and where that's heading. This first graph shows you the effect of reappraisal. Reappraisal hit in 2011, tax year 2011, and then collections for that started in collection year 2012. So taxes are always based on values 1 year prior. You can see when reappraisal hit, we lost about $206 million of value at that time. The economy was down. We were anticipating that would decrease. But one good thing that people don't always realize is that House Bill 920, which when values rise, millage rates go down, it does the opposite. When values go down, millage rates go up. One thing that did happen at that time, though, we did lose some of our tax revenue because we did have some levies that were more recent levies. The one that was passed in 2009, that was 7.4 mils. That one actually was already being collected at 7.4 mils, so we couldn't drop down any farther than that. What you see here in 2013, tax year 2013, is a pretty nice increase. That increase is about $56 million, and that came primarily from the addition of the casino. The casino opened in full in October of 2012. Therefore, the full value of that casino would be placed on January 2013, would be placed on the tax duplicate of 2013 for collection in 2014. The total value of the casino, as you may remember, was $165 million. So 35% of that is roughly $58 million. So that's where most of our increase came from, the casino. We are still We still have a lot of tax cases out there right now where companies are disputing some of the values, but those are starting to kind of fall off the books. There was a lot of tax disputes in Franklin County, and the Board of Tax Appeals and the Board of Revisions had a big backlog on cases. A lot of those have been sent to mediation, and a lot of those are starting to get resolved. So there isn't as much potential tax loss as maybe there was a few years back when a lot of those cases were pending. So right now we feel pretty good about our tax base. We've solidified our tax base, and I do anticipate that it will start to grow. If you look around the Southwestern City School District, you see a lot of new housing starts, a lot of new growth, a lot of new businesses coming in. So I think you'll see this number, our tax values, go up in the future. And where that is important, we're not predicting or projecting a levy anywhere in this cycle right now. But what it means is when our total tax value was here, we obviously would need fewer mills to generate more dollars. Okay? So when our values get down here, that whole millage thing has to be upped a little bit, and we need to be cognizant of that and conscious of that to make sure that we do have a strong tax base. One other thing I'll point out, as you may recall, the homestead and rollback numbers, any new levy does not get the state paying that homestead and rollback portion on the school's behalf. So any new levy would have to have a little bit increased amount of millage rate to collect the same amount as it used to. So that would be something you would have to think about in the future as far as setting millage rates for future tax levies. Any questions on our tax values in general?
How often do they do the reappraisal?
Reappraisal is done a full reappraisal is done every 6 years, and we do a triennial update every 3 years. So we'll have another one of those coming up next year as far as a update.
Okay.
It's a good question. This one's a little hard to read from here, but I'll go through the lines. I want to talk a little bit about state funding. We are currently what's considered a capped district, which means that they throw our student enrollment into the formula, they calculate a number, and then they say, oh, we can't pay you that much, so we're going to cap you. So currently we're capped at 6.25% of what we would get. Our increase is capped at 6.25%. What that means is we would have received an extra $9 million if we weren't capped this fiscal year. We would have to decrease 1,600 students to come off the cap. So we're pretty far into the cap, as you would say. In 2015, there is a 10.5% cap increase. I ran some new numbers based on our new enrollments because the projections that they had last year were old numbers. My new numbers look at we would be into the cap about $2.3 million. We'd have to lose 400 students to come off the cap. So we're still fairly deep into the cap, but that by them moving that up from 6.25 up to 10.5, obviously that gap's going to close a little bit. So we are seeing some decent increase in our state funding next year, but we're still not being funded where we would be if we were just on the formula. Most districts in the state of Ohio are on either the cap or the guarantee. So that's something to think about when we're talking about these funding formulas. You can design all the formulas you want, but if you put caps and guarantees in there, it's really not much of a formula. What I wanted to point out is there were some things that changed pretty significantly. I had this same table in the forecast I did in October. Some things that changed significantly. If you look at this line, in the forecast that I did in October, that line was much, much lower. What has happened, it was about $1.7 million. What's happened is they've added more funds into restricted line items in the state budget. When the October forecast was put in place, they hadn't had that money restricted yet, and we were just receiving what we received the last fiscal year. So once they finally got it implemented and started putting things in specific lines, they put a pretty significant amount into economically disadvantaged aid, economically disadvantaged funding. But what I can say is we've had these funds before. They were called poverty-based assistance. They were called DPIA, Disadvantaged Pupil Impact Aid. They were called a lot of things, different things in the past. It's just the same money that we've received before, the same money that we've spent before. So we know how to, we do have some economically disadvantaged students. We do provide additional services for those students, and those aren't new services that we're providing. It's services we've always been providing because we know those students need a little extra boost. So although it's restricted, we aren't having any trouble spending that. The next thing I wanted to point out is this property tax allocation line right there. That includes a couple things. I talked a little bit about homestead and rollback. Currently, none of our levies are affected by the new law of homestead and rollback, so they didn't take back any of that money. We're still receiving what we've always received. Currently, that's about $10 million out of this total line right there. Okay, but you can see that it decreases over time, or it decreased significantly from this year to this year. What I don't have on this slide, this used to be, let's say we had $10 million in homestead and rollback. We used to get $12 million for personal property tax reimbursement. So that line used to be about $22 million. In 2011, from 2011 to 2012, that amount decreased for our personal tangible property tax reimbursement. It decreased from $12 million to about $8 million. So we lost about $4 million from what would be fiscal year 11 here to fiscal year 12. Again, in fiscal year 13, we decreased another $4.5 million. And what we were told by the state when they did this state budget right here is that we would receive the same amount, that $4.5 million in reimbursement for loss of tangible personal property tax. We'd receive that same $4.5 million through fiscal year 2026. So it's supposed to go out for a long time. But what I can tell you is that a state budget done here doesn't mean anything about state budgets in the future. So they could take that extra $4.5 million they're giving us right now, and they could take that away from us. I do have that amount in the forecast right now. I still have it in each year through fiscal year 2018, so I am counting on that money to be there, but I'm very cautious that could be something in the state budget in future years that they look at and they decide that, hey, maybe we need to take that money away. So I just want to point that out, make sure that you're aware of that it is included in the forecast, but it is one that has been volatile in the past, and it has been one that the state has decided to take away from school districts. So that's, in the overall forecast, that's probably the one thing that I feel probably the most uncomfortable about, and that's in my forecast, and I just want to make sure you were fully aware that it was in there. So I'll make any adjustments as I hear more about that.